Hello, welcome back guys, and in this video we are going to see how we can implement the staff list page and add staff page. We already did that before, but in this video we are going to rectify all those issues which we are getting actually on this staff list as well as add staff page. So without wasting much time, let's quickly go back to UI and we'll see if that page is working fine. Okay, this is fine. We are able to basically route to this staff page, and then I'll say refresh page, and we should be able to call it should be able to call those staff API, but here we can see there's no API getting called. So for that, what we need to do is we need to go back here, and then I'll go back in staff list page, and here we should check whether that API we are calling here or not. And how we can do that? Okay, here we can say okay, fetch all staff is there, but then this function should be mapped here, get all staffs. Yeah, that is completely fine. So actually this function should be there in, we know that this function is the action function because we are mapping actions here, right? So what I'll do is I'll just search it on action, and then we can see here, okay, this is present there, then we should have this function as well. Okay, this is also there, then why that a specific function is not getting triggered? For that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in UI, and then let's see on console if we are missing something. Yeah, we are missing something here. Staff store is not mapped. It is saying module namespace not found, right? So now we know that we are where we are registering this specific store module, right? We are doing that inside the store folder, and then here if I'll say okay, come in index.js, even though we have those staff store file over there, but then we missed to register on the global store, right? And how we can do that? We can say okay, import star as, and this time it is going to be staff store. I'll say from, and then this has to be imported from, not double, I'll use single, and then here I'm going to say okay, staff store, and then index.js. Now we need to just use this here and map inside this module. I'll say staff store, and we are going to spread this staff store so that it will put all those actions, getters as well as mutations, right? And then I'll say namespace as true, so that we should be able to access this store using its namespace. So I'll save it, and let's go back in UI. And now we are expecting that functionality to be triggered. So you can see here that functionality is actually getting triggered, and we are getting the data back from the API, right? And how can we verify that? Of course, this is the route which we are calling from mounted, right? And what mounted is, you all guys know, it's a lifecycle method of Vuejs application. So till here this is fine, but then why this get all books is getting called even though we are not calling books? Let me just clear this network console and refresh this page, and let's see if that is getting called once more. No, that is not getting called, and that's the expectation. So what's next? So on click on this add staff, we should be actually able to route to add staff page, and there we should be able to feed all those details, right? So for that, I'll just click add staff, and you can see we are able to log in here. Route is changed actually, but then the page is not loading. That means there is some issue, and we need to find out those issues here. And if I'll click on console, you can see the issue is there. And why exactly issue is there? Because you can see here the staff name is there, but we have not defined the staff name. Okay, that we can omit. And here also you can see the view you are trying to render for path does not have required Ionic page. That means the page which we are going to render here is of course add staff page, and this page must have Ionic page as a parent component, right? So for that, what we are going to do is, very fast thing, we are going to rectify this staff name issues, and then we will rectify this Ionic page. And we know that how we can do that, right? So let's first go inside book list, not book list, but this time it is going to be staff list page, and there we need to define this key actually, staff name, right? And where we should define this, Of course this data is going to be changed, so computed property is not the place where we should define it. So instead of book name we should say staff name. Let me just save it, and it should be resolved actually. And then next what I'm going to say here is, if we have this staff page, okay, just let's, before doing staff add, what I'm going to say here is, okay, we have all those variable here. So for registering a staff we need serial number. Okay, we will show serial number, ID, and then we'll say, okay, let's say staff name, and that in that case I'll say staff name. And then what else we have in staff? So let me go back here, and then I'll say model. And what I'll do here, I'll just split this screen so that parallelly I can see what we have defined over there in model. And for that what we need to do is we need to go here and open staff.go. Now we can see here we have this much of property over there. So of course name we have used, then we should say, okay, this time it is going to be email, right? And then here also it is going to be email, right? And then here also we need to change the sort key. Sort key is going to be name, icon should be true, visible should be true, fine. And then in case of email we should say email, right? And short icon should be visible over there, right? Next what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, okay, the password should also be there, so that as a staff owner, as a bookshop owner, I should be able to change the password of the staff if I want, right? So for that I'm going to say, okay, password should also be there, and here I'll say password, right? And here of course I'm going to say sort key. Sort key is nothing but in this case it is going to be password, but we don't need to sort based on the password, right? There's no means of doing that. So show icon should not be true, it should be false, but the field column should be visible, right? That's what we are doing here. And then we should have a status as well, so I'll say status, right? And in the, okay, we have a status over there, so we can just remove this, we don't need this actually. All right, and then what else we have bookshop ID as well, so we don't need bookshop ID as well in this case, because the staff will be fetched based on the bookshop ID itself, right? And then what else we have created date and modified date. So what we are going to say, okay, created date should be there and action should be there. So published year we don't need, so I'll just remove it from here. That's completely fine, right? But we don't have any price over here, so actually we don't need to do any modification here in this get columns config. If you remember what we did, why we did here, because if we want to, that column should show certain symbol just before the data cell. So what we are doing is we are filtering those data, and then we are assigning the respective symbol, right? But in this case we are not doing any functional, we are not showing any symbol, so I'll just say, okay, just leave it, you don't need this, simply return cc, right? So now we are done with this staff list, but here we need those key and property and of course the table component. And how we are going to do that, let me do that quickly. And let me first close this splitted screen so that you will be able to see whole screen. And I'll go back to book list, and inside book list we have this app table component over there. So I'll close this row, I'll just copy whole of its row and come back in book list, not book list but staff list, and I'll just paste that row over here, right? But in this case app table component should also be there, so it is there actually. And then I outline, trash bin outline is also there, so we don't have to worry about the icons, right? And then here get column config, get all books, but in this case we are not going to use get all books, instead we are going to use get all staffs. And why we are doing that, because this time we are going to show staff list, right? And this staff list is obviously coming from the getter which we have defined in action, right? That is how we are fetching data, we all know that, right? So if you guys are having any issue, please let me know in the comment section. And then we are saying pagination is going to be false, we are no more applying pagination over here, okay? We'll see that later in the video, okay? And then we have all those props here, on sort function is also there, on page change is also there. Let's verify if that function exists down below. So I'll just say control F. We can see here one of two, that means it is used somewhere or defined somewhere, right? And let's do this for on page change as well. Okay, 2 is there, that means it is there. And on limit change also there's 2, you can see. So that means it is there somewhere in down below, but again you need to make sure that should exist, right? So now that is fine, and then I'll say action click is also there, that is also completely fine. Now we have all those data in place, and we should be able to see table component over there in the list screen, right? So what I'll do here is I'll just go down, and in this case when we click on view, we are no more going to switch to add book page, right? We are going to switch to add staff page. So I'll say staff, right? And then the value will be okay underscore id, of course, and in this case delete staff by id should be there. So let's see if that is there. Okay, that is also present there, so we don't have to worry about adding all those stuffs from very scratch, right? Because we created a certain structure and then we are following the same structure. So we can add hundreds of different components, hundreds of different functionality on top of this structure. So let me just save it, and I will go back to UI, and you can see we are getting this data over here. Let me just refresh this and we'll see if that works fine. Yeah, that's completely working fine. We are able to see this staff add there, right? But what if I'll go back to a staff list page? I'm able to see that there, right? But we have certain issue over here. Data is coming as undefined. And why is that so? So this fetch staff is actually returning null, right? And that is why that value is getting set as null in the Vuejs store, and to be specific, in the staff store, right? But there should be some data, by default data, right? And for that what we need to say is, okay, that's fine. Even though you're getting null as well, that's completely fine. We don't have to worry about. But there's one issue here. Get staffs, we are getting, okay, get staffs is saying unknown getter. There's no get staffs getter. And how can we verify that? I will go back in getters, staff getters. Okay, it is get books. Actually this should be get staffs, right? I'll say get staffs, right? And how is it happening here? So let me go back in bookstore. Did we change something there? That's completely fine. Then why staff is not working? So a staff is there, that's fine. Open staff is also there. Okay, we didn't change that over here. We changed only there in mutation. So this time I'm going to change in getter as well. So I'll say staffs, and then I'll say get opened staff, right? Let me just save it and go back to UI and see if that works. Okay, that works fine. But then again we are getting undefined, but that we are going to resolve later, right? That's not a worry factor because the data can be undefined. And how can we say that? Actually we'll just go here in the API and click on preview. You can see the data is coming as null, right? So in that case data won't be there. Now once we'll add the staff list should be coming here, and it should be working as per expectation. For that, for adding data, we need to design this add staff page so that we should be able to create a new staff, and then those staff will get visible over here, right? So let's design that page, and what we are going to do here is we are going to just go back in add book page, and I will just copy this component, not component but the whole page. But we need to make sure one thing, the page name. In this case you can see here book list is showing there, right? That's completely fine, but in the staff list it should be staff list actually. Yeah, that's completely fine. Now we'll come back here in add staff, and I'll paste that code, but we need to change this functionality to staff functionality, right? Then staff should be working as well. And how can we do that? So we'll say, okay, that's fine. Instead of this get book ID, actually we need staff ID, right? So I'll just do Control D and I'll change it to get staff ID, right? Let me just save it, and I believe this is getter, so let me check and verify if that is the case. Okay, get staff is computed property, of course, and here we don't need book ID. We should be saying, okay, this is staff ID actually. So I'll say staff ID, and then of course the parameter will be ID, right? So now next what we are going to do is, instead of book, I'm just going to replace it with staff, right? What I'm going to select is, I'm going to select all those word with book, and I'm going to say, instead of this, just change it to staff, right? Now this book is changed to staff, and we know that we have getter available as a name, get opened staff. Then finally in here we don't need to use book stored, instead we can say it's going to be staff store, right? Since we are dealing the data with the staff, right? I'll just save it, and you can see create staff is of course there, get staff by ID is also there, and update staff by ID must be there. Let me just search it, and if it is there, yeah, it is there in actions, right? So that is it for now, but then we have to change certain data here as well. This time this is not going to this dot book, instead what I'm going to say is this is going to be staff, all right? And here as well I'm going to say it is going to be staff, right? Now let's go back here, and here also we need to say it's going to be staff, and then rest of the thing will be as it is, right? I will just save it, and get staff by ID is what? Let me just search it here, and you can see here get staff by ID is a function that's completely fine, but then this is get staff by ID should not be getter. Yeah, there's no getter, because the name should be then colliding, and Vuejs will get confused that which one to pick, right? So that is it for this, and what I'm going to do next is add a staff message should be there, and then update staff message should be there, right? And from where this message is coming, let's go down and see from where that message is coming. Add a staff message. Okay, I'm not able to see that message here, so from where it is coming? Okay, it is coming from here, but this should be defined in a constant file. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this, and I'll say, okay, go back in constant, and then just define that property over here, not property but the constant. So add a staff message. In this case I'll say add all the required staff details below, right? And next I'm going to say update book details below. So in that case I'm just going to say, okay, update, let's say update staff details below, but the key will be update in this case, right? So we are done with this constant, and I will go back to the staff page, add a staff page, and here we can see, okay, that is imported over here, so we don't need to worry about that. And then we have the respective, but in this case we don't need book name, of course we need to replace that with the staff name, right? So I'll say staff name, and this actually this is not required, but let it be for now. Later on if this is not required we will remove that, all right? Now next what I'm going to say here is, okay, instead of book it should be staff, since it will be storing all the data related to a staff only, right? So this should be a staff actually, and then I think we are good with all those functionalities. We just need to check it, but then before testing it, what I'm going to say here is this book name should be changed to something else. This should be changed to a staff name. So I'll say staff name and then staff name, right? No more book. Let me just change this at every places. I'll say staff, all right? So in this case staff name, not a staff name, but the name staff.name, right? And here staff code won't be there, so we can just remove this column. Of course this column is not required. And then, okay, let me just Control Z so that we can reuse that column, and we'll just change the name and all. So I'll say, okay, email is required over there, so name email, and for that let me split this screen once more so that I should be able to see that all details from the staff model. So I'll just open this staff model, and then accordingly I will make changes here. So a staff code is of course no required, so instead of staff code I'll say email. All right, and then it will be email, right? And then we have floating position, that is correct. And then here also we need to say this data is going to be type, or not type, but the data is going to be email. Next I'm going to use it for password. So for password, what I'm going to say here is going to be password, staff password, let's say. All right, so here you say staff email, that's better. And then the type is going to be password in this case. All right, and the label is of course going to be password, and value also should be going to be of password, right? Then one more thing we need here is status, right? And that's it. But in this case status should be boolean, so we cannot take that boolean value in a input box. For that we need a switch over there, right? And how we can use switch? We have defined that switch when we have created a couple of component in the component videos, right? So if you will just open these components, you can see we have switch over there, right? And how should we use this switch? The same way how we use this app input. What I'm going to say here is just remove this app input, instead use app switch here. So I'll say app and then switch, right? And then we need to provide all those data to this switch so that it should work in a specific way. And next thing is, do we need this author and all? No, we don't need that. But we need one more thing here, as you can say we need to show created date. So I'll say okay, let's show created date as well. So I'll say created, let's say staff created date, right? So I'll say staff created date, but this date should be actually disabled. We should not be able to modify this date, right? Why we are not going to modify? Because let's say this stuff is created on a certain date, but that date should be constant. After that there should not be any modification on the creation of that date, but you can of course modify the modified date, right? So in this case I'm going to say okay, created date, right? And then this will only be visible based on the condition. So we know that how we can put a condition on a Vuejs element. So I'll say weave, we use weave directive over there, and then we need to put that condition here. And what is going to be the condition? Of course the condition is going to be get, and we can say staff ID, right? If a staff ID is there, then only this specific field will be visible over there, or it won't be visible at all, right? So what I'll do here is I'll just copy this, and okay, before copying the label should also be there. So I'll say created on, let's say, right? So then I'll copy this from here and I can paste it down below. All right, but this time this is going to be modified date, right? Modified date. And here also I'll say modified on, right? Here also we need to say modified date, so that it will bind to modified date, not the created date. Cool, till here we are good, right? And then next what we need is, we don't need this actually, okay, we need this, but this time I'm going to use this row only for only for that switch, because switch won't look good in between multiple input element, because that is a small element, right? It's just design kind of things. So if you want to put that there, you can put that of course, but then page won't be looking good. So I'm going to cut it from here. I'm going to use that on a separate row, and that will look much better then. So what I'll say here is, instead of this description, use this switch component over here. But how can we use switch? For that we can say okay, just register that switch component here, so that I should be able to use, but still it's not getting imported. How? So I'll say import switch as well, import app switch, but it is not getting imported. Let's go back in switch component and see if that is getting exported. Yeah, that is getting actually exported. Then what can be the issue? So let's import that manually now. Switch from, and then I'll say components, and then we have app switch.view file over there. Alright, and already we have registered this file here, so we should be able to use this file above in the template, right? That is how we are going to use template. Now what data we need to provide here, and we can go back in app switch so that we can collect all those data, and then we can provide those property over here. So I'll say okay, just go in app switch, and here you can say title. It expects a title, so I'll say title, and this time it is going to be status, right? And then enable on off label should be true, that is already by default true, and then checked should be actually dynamic, right? So I'll do one thing, I'll bind this checked with staff object. I'll say staff dot status. If that is true, means this app switch will be checked, or else it will be false. That's simple, right? And then next what I'm going to use is disabled. So of course this app switch should not be disabled, because we should be able to make a staff active or inactive, right? So don't provide disable for now, and we are done with this app switch, right? And what else we have? We have clear staff over there, create a staff, and then update a staff as well, right? So that is fine. And then I will come back here, I'll just close this split screen from here, so that you should be able to see my screen properly. And then here you can see we have all those staff data in place, but there's no property which is which is going to be of type float or string, right? No, not a string but the integer. So we can completely remove this all property, since we need only staff. And here also we can completely remove all those property, but this time we need modified date, so that when we update those data, the modified date should be there, present there in the DB or in the collection, right, on the staff collection. So let me just save it, and this time what I'll do is, I believe this should all be working fine. Let's go back in UI and check if the page is loading or not. I will refresh the page. Okay, this page is loading actually fine, but then if I'll click on add staff, it should be working. Yeah, we are able to see all those details which we have, defined over there, right? Now we should be able to enter all those staff details, and then it should be saved properly. So I'll say okay, let's say John, and then email is going to be john@gmail.com, for example. Why it is not getting entered here? John@gmail. Okay, so we have defined the length over here, so that's why it's not allowing more character. That's kind of validation on this input, and which is actually good. This validation is working fine. So we need to change the validation for all this email as well as password, so that it will work in expected way. And for that we know this is our app input component, and here we need to say okay, password minimum length should be, let's say, 8, and maximum length should be 16, right? Similarly we can say in case of email as well, we need to say minimum length is going to be 10 and maximum is going to be 64, let's say. Name is completely fine from 3 to 60 maximum, right? And then rest of the data is fine. So let me just save it and go back to UI. I'll click on refresh, and we will fill all those required details, and then we should be able to save a staff. But before saving a staff, let me go back to MongoDB so that I can show you there's no respective collection created over there corresponding to the staff. So I'll just click on refresh database. You can see there's no staff collection over there, but as soon as we'll save the data, staff data, it should be created with the respective staff data. So let's feed John over here, and then email I'm going to put john@gmail.com, right? And password I'll say PASSWORD 123. That's enough, right? 11 character is already there, minimum is 8, of course. So created on, we actually don't need to show, right? Because this created on should be a date and it should be coming by default, right? So what I'm going to do, let's go back here and get a staff ID. That means this condition is getting true. And how come this condition is getting true? We don't have any ID over there on UI, right? So how come that condition is true, right? So for that I'm going to go back in view dev tools, and here I will click on this component and I will try to open the same component. All right, and then here we have a staff add. Finally we can see here get staff ID is not there. Then why this is showing, right? Actually this should not show. Let's go back in code and see if that is the issue. So get staff by ID, is it, am I using get staff by ID? No, it should not be get staff by ID. Actually it should be get staff ID, and that's what the expectation is. So I'll just copy it from here and then I'll paste that here. So I'll do Control D and I'll paste it here. So now it should be working in the expected way. We should have all those data over there. We can say name, email and password, and status is also there. So we should be able to save this data and then it should work in the expected way. But then one more thing we left is, just before saving this data, right, we need to say, okay, this is staff I am adding, then my username should also be there as a bookshop ID, right, since I am the owner of the bookshop. So for that I need a user ID. And how can I take user ID? Since user ID, if I'll go back on UI, we can see here in Vuejs, and if I'll go in auth store, user ID is present in logged in user underscore ID. And how can we take this data, right? It's completely different store. And here if we'll see, we are already using this map actions. Then where I will take those data from the auth store? That's a confusion point, right? But then what Vuex is saying, okay, you don't need to worry about that. You will just say, again you will do map actions, and this time you are going to say data should be coming from different store. So this time I'll say auth store, right? And then here I'm going to say we are not going to use map action actually, so we need actually getters. So I'll cut it from here and then I'll come here and paste it. So not map actions, but we need map getters, right? The same functionality will be implemented here as well. But this time I'm going to say, okay, take out user ID. But how can we take out user ID? For that I need to go back in auth store and in the getter. And in getter we have a function get logged in user. I'll copy that function and come back in add book page, right? And here what I'm going to do is, where did we imported that? Just now we did some changes over there, right? Not in add, I'm sorry, it should be in add staff. Right here I'm going to paste this and the same functionality name, right? Now using this key I should be able to get those user data, and then I should be assigning those bookshop ID property here as well, right? So in this case create staff, right? In this case I'm going to say, okay, one more key will be there with name bookshop underscore ID, and the value is going to be this dot. Of course we'll be using that same getter, and then I'll say user, right? User should be there, and then the underscore ID. Or even if underscore ID is not there, it should be taking ID, right? Why I'm doing this? Because let's say if you are changing this backend, right, As of now we are using MongoDB, but let's say tomorrow we are going to use SQL. So in that case we won't be having underscore ID. In that case we will be having ID. But then we have to change all those underscore ID in the UI as well. So if we won't make that compatibility here itself, we should be taking a lot of time to change at all those places. That's not the good way of doing that. So we are using ID as well, so that this UI will be totally independent of the backend changes. All right. So similar code, I'm going to copy it from here and paste it inside update functionality as well. Right. Let me save this and go back to UI, and then we will test if that functionality works fine. I will click on refresh, and then here I'm going to say staff name John, and then email is going to be john@gmail.com, and then password is going to be password. Now go back to network console and we will verify if this is working fine. Of course that will be verified by seeing that toast message as well, but that's more satisfactory as a developer to come to network console and then see back the response, right? So I'll just make it as active as well, and then I'll click on save. You can see it create API is triggered and our details has been saved successfully. But then why this second API has been called? And actually with what API has been called? So okay, it is calling staffs API and then undefined, and it is a get API actually, which is not expected. And why that happens? Okay, so thing is, once the detail is saved, what it's trying to do is it is trying to take out that ID and then update route back to the same page again, but ID should be there, right? So that we should be able to update those details. But then ID is getting paused here as undefined. Why is that? So we need to debug that. But before that, we can verify one more functionality here. If we'll go back in staff list, that list should be showing here in the table. So let's click on staff list and see if that is working fine. So get all staff, and here still we are seeing null data. And why is that? So we'll debug that API and we'll see why is that happening. So let's go back quickly in the code, and here we can see, okay, once this is successful, you need to route to this page and then get opened staff dot inserted ID. Are we getting inserted ID? Let's see. Let me go back here and then click on create. We are actually getting this inserted ID, but then let's go back in view dev tools as well and verify if that inserted ID is there or not. So click on this staff store, and of course this is Vuex, so you need to select Vuex as well, and then you can see here staff, open staff is there actually, and open that, and there you can see inserted ID is there. Then why it is not able to route to that inserted ID, right? That should be working fine actually. And for that, how you can verify? Just go back in get opened staff, and where is that? That will be of course inside staff store, and this time it will be inside getters. So you can see here, even though we have the name get opened staff, but we are returning opened book. That's wrong actually. And get staffs, here also we are returning books. So we need to say, okay, you need to return staffs, not book, since this is staff store. So here also you need to say, you need to return opened staff, and this is nothing but the state variable which you have defined in the state. Let's just verify, cross verify that if the name is same, staffs and opened staff. I'll go back in state.js file and we can see here staffs and opened staff is there, right? Now if we'll go back here, we should be able to see that record over here, and it should be working in the expected way. Still we are not getting record. That means we are not getting record from the API itself. So how it will be visible over there? It won't be visible. But then I will try to add one more stuff, but this time the update should be working fine. We should not be there should not be any failure on get by ID. So I'll say, let's say do, and this time do@gmail.com. Password is password 123. and I'll make it as active. I'll save it, and you can see successfully saved. Once it is saved, it should actually again redirect to this page with the ID, but something is breaking over there, and let's see what is that. So state.stops is not iterable actually, and from where this is happening, let's go in mutation, and there it is happening. So we need to say explicitly, we need to handle this case explicitly. If staffs is not there, you need to return, right? So I'll say if not staffs, we are not going to perform any functionality on the state variable. So I'll just say return, no need to go ahead. And then I'll copy the same from here, I'll paste it here. If a staff is not there, just return, no need to do any functionality. And here as well we need to say, and staff is not there, return. And then delete should work as it is. Now let's go back in UI and then add one more staff over there, and this time I'm going to say, let's say Frank, and the name is going to be frank@gmail.com, right? Every time I'm using Gmail, let's say this time I'm going to use something else, yahoo.com, and then password is going to be password123. Let's make it is active, and we don't have to, as a user, we don't have to select active by default. So instead what I'm going to say here is, in add staff page, I'm going to say let's make it active by default, and for that what I have to say here is, okay, put a status over there, status, and then make it true by default, and let me save it, so that every time we don't have to manually trigger that switch and make it active, right? So I'll go back in UI and let me just refresh the page, and you can see that by default this is active, right? So I'll say Frank, and then email is going to be frank@yahoo.com, right? And password is password123. You need to make sure that your password is so strong that nobody can breach, right? So here what I'm going to say is save, and then we will see if that works. Save. Now you can see, okay, we are now coming back on this screen with the ID. That's the expectation, and this time created on as well as modified on is there. But then if I'll just update this functionality, let's say I'm going to update this password to something else, I'll say password, okay, this is of 8 characters, so I'll just do update, and this should be working actually. So it's updated, right? And so our create update, create API, and get by ID and update is also working fine. We just need to rectify that get all API for this stuff, right? So let's go back in staff list page, and we will see why the data is not coming. But before that, we need to make sure payload is also there. So we have the payload over there, but then we are not passing any filter. We need to pass filter as well there. So what here we are going to say, okay, use this filter to fetch out all those staff stored. And how can we say that? I will go back in staff list page, and here what I will say, use my user ID, and then again the question is same, how can I take out user ID? Of course user ID we can take it from here, get logged in user. So I'll just copy it from here. I will go back in a staff list, and in the getter I can map auth store as well here, right? Then using this property, using this getter function, we can take out those ID, user ID. And where we need to feed that, of course we need to feed that here. So here I'm going to say, okay, data is fine, but then data should be bookshop underscore ID, and then the value is of course going to be not like this, but we need to use this keyword for that. I'll say this dot get logged in user, and then there should be user, and then user will have underscore ID. Now let me just save this and go back to UI. We will see that if that is working fine. So we can see that API got triggered, and this time we have data, and inside data we have of course this bookshop and ID. but this should not be going actually in data. It should be simply an object and it should contain the bookshop ID. And why is that happening? Because from here this is fine, and then we need to go back in actions file. Okay, and here we are, okay, we are passing data which we are passing from there, and then the data, this data should be actually going on API. So I will go back here in API and I will say get all stuff, that is get stops, right? So from there we are taking out data only, right? But those data contains all those properties, right? Nested properties. But we don't need nested property, instead we directly need data here. So what we can do here is we'll go on UI and go back to sources, so that we should be able to debug this and find out from where this is happening. So I'll go in actions, and this time we need to take staff store actions, and here we need to say okay, this one, right? Data get staffs, right? Then the issue is here itself, because the filter should be actually filters, data should be filters dot data, not the filters, right? I'll go come back here and I'll just remove this breakpoint. It is no more required because we know the exact error. So staff store, we need to go inside staff store, and here we need to say okay, you need to just give filter dot data, and then it should work in the expected way. Let's go back to UI and test that functionality and see if that works. So go to network tab and see this last API, and then you can see payload, there's nothing being passed. Why is that so? So let me clear it from here. I'll just do refresh and see if that works. You can see API is getting triggered, but then this time no data is being passed. Why is that so? So anyhow, we have to debug over here so that we can find out the exact issue. So I'll just click refresh once more and then see what is coming inside filters. You can see inside filters we have data, but this time bookshop ID is coming undefined, and that is because maybe we are calling inside mounted, and this, of course, this mounted is on this mounted state that getter should be ready, but somehow the data is coming from somewhere else, either from local storage or from different data source. So this getter is actually getting undefined. That is why we are not getting data over here, and then of course this default object ID is getting assigned over there, right? So that is the exact issue. So we need to rectify that issue. And how can we do that? We will go back here in the staff list page, right? And then of course this is the reactive data, but then this data we can say okay, we can say user over here, and then we can say this dot get logged in user, so that we invoke this specific getters here itself, and then, or else instead of getter function we can take data from the storage as well, since we will be having those user data in the application here, and we can take out from here as well. So this time I'm not going to use header, since this is the reactive property, and if data is going to take, it's going to take time for the data to come, so then we will be getting null, and then this API will be not working as per the expectation. So here what I'll say is okay, this is fine. I'll say local storage service, right? But I'm going to name this bit different, not local storage service. I'm going to name it as a storage service, and then I will be using this storage service down below to access the user data, right? And we know that we have a certain functionality over there, and it is going to be get persisted data, and this time I'm going to say logged in user, because we'll be having user data in the logged in user, right? So we will get the logged in user data over here, and then user we can say okay, this user will have underscore ID then. So I'll say underscore ID. Now every time we will be having user ID for sure. So let me just save it and go back to UI, and then network tab, clean this and just refresh the page, we will be able to see that user ID is getting paused. I will click on this and then still we can see it is not getting paused. So for that we have to debug that again. I will go back in add, not add, staff add page, not staff add but the add staff list page, right? And there only we are calling this get all staff, and user data should be there actually. So let me just refresh the page and see if that works. You can see his user is there, but then user is having user, and then inside user we have underscore ID, right? So I'll go back here, right? What I'll do is user dot, we cannot say user, but we can say user data since it will have token as well. So I'll say okay, user data dot user and then underscore ID will be there, right? I will just save it and then see if that works. Let's go back in network tab and refresh the page. Alright, so we have user data over there, and then inside user we have underscore ID, so it should be working. I'll just remove this breakpoint and let it go. So when we'll come back in staff, not staff but the network tab, and here we can see bookshop ID is being paused, but still we are not getting data from the API. That means there is some issue with the API, and for that what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in API, and this time we are going to debug the API. So how can we do that? Of course we need to go inside the server folder, and then there we can say we cannot, we are not able to debug in this way, so we need to just say stop here, and I will start you using debugger, right? So that we can debug you easily. So let's see if that works. But meanwhile it's restarting, and I will go back in server, and very first thing I will be opening is auth controller, not auth controller but the staff controller, and here I should be able to see those data which is coming in staff service, right? So I will come back here, and there's one function get all staff, right? Let me put a breakpoint over here and here as well, and then I'll put a breakpoint here in this get all staffs, and we will see if the respective data is being paused over there or not. And since we have saved data, right, we need to go back here and check if the data is being saved properly or not. You can see here we have a staffs collection over there, and then the respective data must be present there. So we can see we have saved 3 details, and all those 3 details are there, but then why we are not going to fetch, right? So let's go back and see if Golang debugger is starting properly. Okay, it has been started almost. We need to wait a couple of more seconds. Meanwhile, we will try to understand if how this is giving issues, right? So if I'll go in staff filter, right, here we can see page number limited there, that's fine, but here we have bookshop ID, that is also fine, but this in case we have interface over here, that is also fine. At least the data should be there, but it can be of any type, which is expected way. But then since it is running 200, that means there won't be any issue here, there won't be any error, right? The code will be successfully executed till here. So that means we need to go inside get all stops, and here we need to see if there's any issue. And how can we say that? Let's go back, let's go inside the implementation of this get all stuff, and then we'll see there. So here also we can see we have to pass filter, and that is going to be of type interface. Of course that's completely fine. And then if I'll go inside this find all, and if I'll click on implementation, we can see here we are applying the same filter in the find, and then it should be actually working fine. Alright, and then it will just convert all those into interface, and then we'll be finally getting all those documents, right? So let's wait a couple of more seconds because that Golang server is okay. Guys, we can see here our Golang server is started successfully, and then we should be able to add the breakpoint here as well, right? So I have added all those breakpoint, and let's trigger this API once more, and we will see what is the exact issue over there. I'll just click refresh, and then this API will get triggered, and this time we will be getting that here. So we can see here bookshop ID is actually there, so it will come inside. That's completely fine. Bookshop ID is there, right? And then here also it will go. Then filter DTO will have page number limit. Okay, that's the issue. This page number and limit will also get applied on as a filter, right? And once it is getting applied, means you won't be getting any data, because this page number and limit is not there on that filter, or not filter but in that collection. So that's why we are not getting data. Okay, so I'll just remove it from here for now, since we are not going to use page number and then limit as of now. Later on we'll put those page number and limit, and then it should be working in the expected way. And how we are going to do that, we'll see that in upcoming videos, not now. So I'll just remove it from here. I'll save it once more, and then just restart the server, and then this time it should be working as per expectation. We should be getting the not user but the staff data this time, and let's see that. So once that is working fine, what we are going to do next is we should be able to logged in through not user but the staff as well, and then we should be able to fetch a certain data, not certain data, but we should be able to fetch, if I am the staff of bookshop A, then I should be getting all those books of shop A, not B, right? So we'll implement those functionality as well, and then we'll see if everything works fine, right? So let me just allow this access. It's asking me to access allow. Okay, that's fine. Now finally the server is restarted, and let's go back to UI. I'll say refresh, and it should be working this time. Let's see. Still we are not getting the record, and still we are getting the record as a null. Why is that so? So we need to again debug this. That means there is issue with this, right? So for that I'll go back here in all stuff, get all stops. I'll say okay, just go inside this find all and implementation, and then see if we are doing everything correct. If filter equals to nil, that means it is going to assign default filter. But if filter is not nil, then this filter is being used here, and we will see what is exactly happening over there. So I'll just trigger this API once more, and then we'll see what is exactly happening over there. If I'll hover on this, we can see data is there, right? And the bookshop ID is also there, right? But then we cannot pass data in this format. That is the issue here, right? Because it's not expecting data in capital bookshop ID like this. This name is not there present in the collection, so that's why we are not getting any data. So for that, what we need to say explicitly say is okay, if filter is not nil, right? Or else we can say, yeah, if filter is not nil, of course, then of course we'll be having the else case over there. So I'll say else, right? And I'll check okay, filter dot bookshop ID. So this filter is this time going to be of DTO. So I'll say okay, just typecast it to DTO dot staff filter, right? And then I should be able to access this bookshop ID. So how can I do that? I'll say okay, not okay, I'll say ID, let's say staff ID, not a staff ID, it should be book ID actually, book ID, right? And then I'll say okay, typecast it, and if book ID is there, book ID not equals to empty, right? So in that case, why is that so? Book ID mismatch the type string. So okay, this is of type string, then I'll say okay, book ID, I will typecast it to string. All right, that works, not a string, right? If that is the case, then bookshop ID is there, and then in that case I'm going to say filters, not filters, yeah, filter, I'll say filter, right? Okay, which filter it is going to use, so in this case I'll say filters, and it will be filter always, not filter, let it be filters, fine. Now I'll say okay, filter is not null, not nil, right? So what I'm going to do here is I will say okay, filter, not filter, I will say okay, I'll create one variable over here and I'll say if final filter, let's say final filter, and then I'll say equals to bson.m, right? And then this time I'm not going to use this directly, I'll say final filter, and then here also I'm going to say final filter of bookshop, not book, bookshop underscore ID is going to be book ID. All right, but then here we are getting error, and this time this should be typecasted, right? And how can we do that? So we are just going to remove it from here, we cannot check that there, so we just need to do that here itself. So I'll say variable, not variable, I'm going to use shorthand operator to define this. So I'll say bookshop DTO equals to, I will just typecast this filter into book DTO. So DTO dot stop filter, not book, I'm sorry, it is going to be stop DTO, and then I will say stop DTO here as well. So since we will be getting stop DTO, but then here I should be comparing it with, I will convert it with, stop DTO dot, okay, data won't be there still, because we are accepting interface over here. So very first thing we need to typecast, okay, we have typecasted those into interface, but then we should have bookshop ID there. So I'll say bookshop ID, will that be possible? Okay, stop DTO is no of type what, okay, we cannot use directly equals to here, we'll say okay, colon, and then now I'll say bookshop ID, and if this is not nil, of course if data is there it won't be nil, right? So in that case I'm going to say okay, just assign this filter staff DTO, right, staff DTO, but this time I'm going to say okay, use this primitive dot object ID from hex, right, not object ID from hex, since it will be automatic, since we have converted those on the controller itself, so we don't need to do that here as well. So I'll just say staff DTO dot bookshop ID, we don't need to typecast it more, and then we need to say final filter instead of filter. Let's save this and then restart the server, and it should be working fine. If you guys has any other solution as well, you can implement over here, and then finally we should say okay, this should be working in an expected way, and of course it should be as per standard, right? So let's see that in action, and if that works, it's getting restarted. Let's wait a couple of seconds. Okay, it's started. I will allow access. It's actually asking me every time so that firewall won't block it. Okay, so now this is fine. I'll go back here and I'll just click on refresh. Let's see if that works. I'm getting pointer over here. If I'll just hover on it, and I can see bookshop underscore id is there, and I will just remove it, and we can see data is there, right? Now it is completely working fine, but there's one issue over here. We should not show password like this, right? It should be hidden. And how can we do that? Of course, uh, we need to notify this to app table, like we need to hide this field. We should not show this password over here, so we need to say explicitly. And how can we do that? So let's do that quickly, or before that just verify that if we are able to open this stuff and delete it as well. So in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete this do. For that I'll open this. Okay, we are able to open this, that's cool. And then first I'll update this to true. I'll update again. You can see it's updated successfully. And then if I'll come back to staff list page, and then it's showing all data. So I need to refresh this page. Somehow this API is not getting triggered, I believe. And then the latest data is not coming over there. Okay, this is coming here and it's stopping here since we have breakpoint over there. So I'll just pause this breakpoint, and then it is working fine. And then we made that to active, but then still it is not active. Why is that so? Click on this update API and payload. So here you can see status is still going as a false. Instead it should be true actually. Okay, and how can we make sure that? Let's update this once more. I'm going to open it, and you can see it is inactive. And then if I'll activate it and I'll update, let's see that if status is still going false, that means status is not getting updated from here, right? So that's again the issue. So we need to rectify that issue, and I will rectify that issue now. I will come here and I will go back to UI. But before changing this data, let's go back in app component, right? Add component and see there if it is getting modified or not, so that we can say okay, this data is getting modified, but still we are not able to update this. I will open this stuff, and we can see stuff as false. So actually on click of this it should trigger the functionality, but it is not getting triggered. That means our functionality is not working in a expected way, or our component is not working in expected way. So for that we need to go back in client folder, and there we'll first open this component and we will see what is happening over there, right? So app switch, we can see here checked, right? The data is binding based on checked, right? And this checked is actually fine. Whenever we'll trigger this toggle, it should be checked. But why is that not working? Checked. So are we binding the same key over there? Let's go back in views, and here I'm going to open staff, add staff page, and here let's see that if that switch is binding the data properly. We can see here checked is binding the data properly actually, but I believe this data is not two-way binding data. That's why whenever that component change, input change, the data is not reflecting here, right? So that might be the issue. So let's try to understand it more. How can we change this then if it is not binding over here, right? For that, let's go back in UI and press this once more. That is not working, right? And let me just go back to staff list page and add a new staff, and let's see if in that case it is working fine or not. So I clicked on add staff, and you can see by default it is active, and here status is always false. That means this value is not getting binded in two-way. Okay, so we need to modify this, not add stuff, but we need to modify this app switch. And how can we do that? First we need to go back here in the documentation of Vue Ionic, and we'll see if the specific component is there, ion toggle or not. Ion toggle is there. Since we are wrapping this ion toggle with app switch, right? So this should be working in the expected way. Now we can see here this value is getting binded. That's correct. So how can we bind it in two ways, right? We need to find out that over here. So this is just alignment and then justification, that is fine, theming, and then what else? Toggle change event detail. Okay, let's click on this toggle change event detail, and what this will do actually, okay, this will emit certain event, and that event is, I believe, some kind of event. If we'll click on, okay, let's do one thing, go back here and I will say on click, I'll just bind a click event over here, and then I'll say handle toggle event, or I'll say just emit one event from here. So for that we know that we can say, okay, emit event will be there, and then we are going to emit those event to the parent. This is how we are going to pass data to the parent from the child. So I'll say $emit, and then in this case I'm going to say status, not a status, but let's say change, right? And then I'm going to say here event dot target dot value, or just pass event itself, and we should be able to detect those event there. So I'll click save and go back here in staff add page, and here I will assign one more listener over there. So how can we do that? We know that we can capture those event on a component using @, and then this time change will be there, right? Since we are emitting change, so the change should be the same as the event name. So here I'll say, okay, if you are detecting change, so let's accept event, and then just console event, what event is coming over there, and based on the event we'll perform next actions. I'll save it and go back to UI, and let's see if that works. I will refresh the page and come back in console, and then we can verify if that is working fine. You can see here we have those event over here, and if I'll click on this, we should be able to see all those properties over there. And this time I'm going to find, okay, detail is 1 over here, and what else we have? So we will say, okay, we'll say target event dot target, okay, and then what else we have here? So event dot target, but we don't have value over here, but let's see if that value is there or not. So I'll search for the value, or we can say checked. So checked is false. Now if I'll click on checked, then this time we should be getting checked as a true, and if that is the case, then we are going to use, of course, checked property, right? We are going to use checked. So event dot target and then checked. So checked should be true in this case, checked is true, right? So what I'm going to say here is event dot checked, right? And for that, in a single line, we are going to say staff dot status equals to event dot target dot checked, right? Let's save it and see if that works. Okay, I have saved it, and I'll come back here and I will just refresh the page. So this is how we need to debug that API, or this is how we need to debug UI as well, and we should be able to make it work. So now if I'll click on, before that I will open this DevTools as well, so that we can verify, not DevTools, but we need to open component, and we can verify if that respective data changes or not. But before that, there's one more issue. Okay, staff status is getting bind, that's fine. Okay, now here I'll say, you can see it is true, and if I'll click on false, why is not changing? It should be actually changed to false. And let me just refresh if that works. No, it's not changing at all. Actually this should change to false. You can see, okay, it's false and then true. Okay, it's working in a reverse way. So if I'll click on true, it should be true actually, but then it's coming as false. Now it is coming true. Now it's coming false. And how is that possible actually? It should not be possible in that case. So by default it is true, that's completely fine. And then if I'll click on that, it will be actually false. So what can be the issue here? By default it is, if I'll click on that, okay, then the event will get fired and we will be capturing those event here. So instead of doing this here, I can say, okay, just cut it from here and then on app switch change. Okay, this function is going to handle this event and I'll say event. So now define this function down below and then based on that we will be handling this staff status. And that is actually a good way of doing it. So I'll say, okay, you will be getting the event and then you just do this dot staff, and in this case of course you should say, this dot staff dot status, it should be event dot target dot status, right? And then one more thing we need to do here is we have to keep this app switch by default as active. So I'll say true. Okay, let's save it and go back to UI and then see if that is working fine. I will just refresh the page and we should be able to see. So let's open this component once more and we will verify if that is working completely fine. I'll go back in staff add component. Here if I'll open this, you can see staff as true, and if I'll click on this it should be false actually, but it is coming as undefined. Let me just click it once more. Still it's coming undefined. That means there is issue here. And what can be the issue? Event.target.status, not status, it should be event.target.checked, since we are going to use checked hereafter, right? I'll go back here, refresh the page, and let's see that once more. Let's open this component, add staff add, and then you can see staff is coming as a true, and if I'll click on this it should be actually trigger back to false, but it is still not happening. I'll do it once more. Now it is working, but the first time it is not working, and because of that the value is getting reversed. And why is that so? Even though this is okay, let's debug this. I'll go back to source and I'll do Control P and add a staff page is there, right? And then what we are going to do is we are just going to put a debug pointer over there and we will see what data is coming in event. So this time it is true, and if I'll click on this, right, the data should be there as a false. So if I'll say event.target and .checked, let's just copy this and I will paste it in watch. You can also do these things, and this is very easy actually. So I'll just remove these all items, it is not required now, and I will click on add. You can see add icon over here, and if you click and just paste those variable, you should be able to see the output of those variables. You can see it is coming as a true, instead it is false, right? Actually this is false, but you are getting it as a true. That's not the expectation, that is why this value is showing as a true, right? Let me just refresh this page once more and we'll see what value is actually coming over there. So I'll just click on this and see the value is coming as a true still, right? Actually this value should be false, right? And then it should be working fine. But I believe this component is actually, you know, emitting the exact value, exact current state of this status. That's why we are getting the value as true. So we can do one thing, we'll just say not event.target.checked. so that we can reverse those values and take out the exact values, right? So let's save it and see if that works fine. And if that is working fine, means we are good with that. Or else we need to find a different way of handling this scenario, right? That is how we debug our application. So okay, I'll just remove this breakpoint and let's verify quickly in the DevTools itself. So I'll just click on this and come back on this staff add page, open this staff. You can see true as there, true is there, right? And then if I'll click on here, it should be actually false, and then if I'll click on this, then again it should be true. This is not getting true. Now you can say true. Now again if I'll click on this, we can say it's false, right? Now this is working in the expected way. And then if I'll go back to staff list page, right, and I should be able to open this staff, that is working fine, right? And then you can see here staff status is false, right? Status should actually be true. But then why we have only one data over here, since we have lot of data over there, right? So let me just click on staff true. Okay, this should be true actually, but still it is not getting true, and even the store is also not getting reactive. Not a store, but this is staff data. We should have all this data over there, and that should work in expected way. So we'll try to find out this issue in the upcoming videos, but this is it for now. I'll just click on update and we'll see if that is working fine. Let's go back in here and you can see status is going at true. Okay, that's completely fine, it's working now. And that is because of DevTools might be slow or it is not reacting those properties. Okay, but this is actually working, so we don't need to debug more. But still, if you guys are facing any issues, let me know in the comment section. I will try to explain it more and try to fix all those issues if that issue exists. Okay, so I'll go back here in the staff list page and I can see still that is inactive. Why? Because it might load older data. So let's refresh page and you can see active data over there, but this refresh also we should be get rid of this refresh every time, and then every time the data should be refreshed in the refreshed state. That means always latest data should be there. So we'll fix those issues, but for now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete it and see if that message is coming successfully or not. So I'll just click on delete and you can see deleted successfully, and even that deleted from list here as well. So now our staff list is completely working fine, but there's one issue and we will fix this issue. Apart from that, we have a couple of more issues there. Not issue, but we need to implement that. And of course that is the concept of pagination. We need to implement pagination in staff as well as book list page, right? And once we'll implement pagination, of course we are not going to do the pagination in the very beginning, but then we will implement that at last. Apart from that, in the next upcoming video we are going to learn, since we have shop owner, we have bookshop as well. So let me show you what is the exact issue over there. I'll just click on logout, and of course we are able to log out. And then what I'll do here is I'll just click on back. You can see stuff is getting loaded there. Even though I will refresh the page, you can see stuff is getting loaded. Why is that so? It should not load actually, because we are logged out, right? And the same happens to books as well. If I'll say books, we are able to load all the books as well, right? That means anyone can come and see your data, and that's actually not good. And if they can see your data, they can update those data as well. You can see here, I'll just put something else and click on update. You can see the data is getting updated as well, but that's not the expectation. Then your application is not secure, right? So for security, in the next video we are going to use JWT authentication token. Okay, and we will see how that works. That means each user will have its own functionality. That means user will have, basically we will be restricting this functionality so that only the authorized user will be able to update or fetch the list properly, right? Any guest user won't be able to access these details, right? And of course they should not be able to delete and update as well. So we will learn about JWT authentication token in the upcoming video. And if you guys want to go through JWT authentication token and how can we do that in Golang, of course we are going to learn in Golang. So it will be highly beneficial for you since many big companies are using that Golang, not Golang but JWT authentication. And how does that work? I will explain each and every concept of that. And then finally I will restrict all this on the API level. That means your each single API is going to be more secure and more robust, right? So thank you guys, we'll meet in the next video, and till that you can go through the JWT authentication mechanism and you can post down your questions in the comment below. I should be able to answer all those questions as early as possible. If you guys like this video, put like and subscribe to my channel so that you can get the latest feed as well.